Hi, this is Yvonne, and in this video, I'm going to share with you 4 key negotiation techniques that I've learned and use, and I'd love to share them with you. You'll learn key negotiation techniques that you can use in any situation to get what you want. I like this quote on negotiation by John F. Kennedy. He says, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." You see, like it or not, all of us are negotiators. You see, negotiation power is the ability to persuade someone to do something. And if you really think about it, we're negotiating every day with family, friends, at work. And so there's a classic book on negotiation that shares 4 negotiation techniques. And I really enjoyed this book. It's called Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. I really encourage you to read this book. And so I wanted to share with you what I've learned and used. And hopefully that's something that you can find useful as well. The first technique is separating the people from the problem. And that's done through perception. And see, you define perception as a state of awareness. And so how do we become aware? Well, by having a broader perception and a deeper perception. So it's multidimensional. And so the ability to understand the situation the way the other person sees it helps us to have a broader perception. And as difficult as that may be, that is the most important superpower you have as a negotiator. Remember, negotiators are people first. And so think about a pair of shoes, right? So you put on their shoes temporarily just to see how it feels like to walk in their shoes, to perceive the situation based on how they perceive it, helps give you a broader perception. And so understanding their point of view may not necessarily be the same thing as agreeing with it. So you try on their shoes, you see how it feels, you walk in it. Okay, I understand where you're coming from. And you start with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with what they're saying, but that understanding, that broader perception gives you a nice ground to begin your negotiations with a much broader perception. And that gives you a lot more power when you're negotiating. And so another way we have a deeper perception is through our communication skills throughout the course of the negotiation. And so one communication skill that most of us have troubles with, and I've been working on that for quite some time as well, is active listening. And so what is active listening? Well, you know, it's known as the cheapest concession you can make to the other side, just by making them feel like they have been heard. For example, just acknowledge what they're saying. If they're speaking, let them speak all the way until they're safely come to the conclusion of their statements. And instead of just rambling off and kind of saying what you were planning to say, you can pause there and repeat back in summary what they said. So I just want to make sure that I understood you correctly. Did you say, and then just repeat just the summary, just summarize kind of what they've said, the gist of it. And wow, that makes them feel, yeah, you know, we're on the same plane in terms of that grounding and starting point. And so when they feel that they've been heard, then there's an opportunity there to feel a more sense of a partnership throughout this negotiation. So active listening. The other communication technique is speaking about yourself, not about them. And why is that important? Well, you take the emotions and the blaming out of the equation. So for example, if you're upset or angry at what they said or how or their approach, you can say, well, I feel let down. As opposed to, hey, you didn't keep your word. Well, you can argue and say that's the same thing, but actually, no, it's not. It's almost like a neuro-linguistic programming in there, because you're essentially making it about you and you're saying, I feel let down. And so nobody can argue with that. You're making it about yourself, how you feel, as opposed to blaming the other side and saying what they didn't do, right? So you didn't keep your word. And so what does that do? Well, that makes the other person's guard go up. Oh, I didn't. And then they go off defending themselves. And so it becomes more about a defense and an offense type of conversation, as opposed to a conversation that's open, that's fluid, that allows for a continuum through to the negotiation process. And so think about speaking about yourself rather than the other person. So that's reframing the way you say the words. And the third point I wanted to bring up quickly on the communication is speaking for a purpose. And so when you speak, be very purposeful with what you say, and try your very best to bite your tongue and not speak more than the other party. And so think of it this way: you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. Think of it that way. And so speak less and listen more than you speak, so that you don't run into the problem and the potential of divulging more than you should. And so remember, when we are communicating, we want to use active listening. We want to speak about ourselves versus the other person. And then we want to speak less, okay, and listen more. The second negotiation technique is focus on the interests, not on positions. And so oftentimes what makes negotiations uncomfortable, what makes negotiations with a lot of conflict, is people are locked into their positions. Well, I want this, but you want that. And it's really hard to get common ground when the basis of the negotiation really is expecting to get what you want and what you set for in your position. And so as a savvy negotiator, you know that it's more than just the position. You're looking for what the motivators are. You're going behind the scenes and trying to really understand what that core motivator is, because you're not going to negotiate on the surface or the facade. You're going to really negotiate based on the interest. You see, and that's a different strategy that's really going to help you succeed. So think of a stage curtain. And so the actual curtain is the position, right? That front. But what you're looking for is behind that curtain. You're trying to move that curtain, and where the interest is, that's where the light is. And so how do you get there? You can simply ask the other person, well, why is it, or what is your main concern that makes you want this? And so the position is what they want. The interest is why they want that. And so you want to negotiate from the interest, because that's where the options are. When you really understand what their key motivator is, then there's a lot more options, and you can really get creative to be able to meet their needs. Because at the end of the day, a negotiation is meeting the needs of each individual. And so you don't have to come to the table with your cards up. You can share what your need is and why you want what you want with the other party, so that it's crystal clear. Because at the end of the day, a negotiation is solving a problem. And that problem is the needs of each party. We want to make sure that each party's needs are met, and these needs are not coming across in the position. The needs are coming across in the interest, the behind the scenes motivators. And that's where you want to negotiate from. The third technique is inventing options for mutual gain. Each side sees a situation as fixed, and it's almost like I get what I want, or you get what you want. And so it's almost like they see the situation like a fixed pie, and they want their slice of that pie. But instead of limiting yourselves, why don't you just get a bigger pie, right? And so how do we do that? Well, by seeking out different options and thinking outside of the box. And so from a practical perspective, this is done with 3 different sessions. Instead of just jumping into the negotiations, you're really stepping back and starting with a brainstorming session. And that really frees people up to use their imagination, think creatively, think outside the box, and come up with constructive solutions. And so there's no stopping this process with trying to find that one magic answer. No, this is a free-flowing, fluid, creative session. Then the second session, that's when you start evaluating. And so it's almost like a big funnel of all those great ideas that were captured with no judgment. And now this is an opportunity to start judging and start identifying and whittling those ideas down into something more concrete. Maybe you can use that evaluation session, walk away from that evaluation session, and you know it's done when you've identified your top 3, for example, or top 2 ideas. Okay. And then the third session, now you're negotiating. Now that's a negotiation session where you identify, okay, what's that top situation or that top option we're going to decide upon. The fourth and final negotiation technique is using objective criteria. Now, for some negotiations, it's going to be based on some standard or process. And so you're going to want to first agree on which standard you're going to use, and that's going to be the basis of which your negotiations are going to be from. So agreeing on which objective criteria is going to be key to settle that problem. And so one example is, let's say you're buying a house. And so you're thinking, as the buyer, what is the offer you're going to want to tell the seller? Well, there's different objective criteria in this case. For example, you can talk to your realtor and they can come up with what are the last 5 houses that were sold in that area, and they call those comps. So you say, hey, can you show me what are the last 5 or 3 comps in that area? And those are comparables. And so if the house size, rooms, etc. is comparable, then you can kind of figure out the average of those, and then you base your offer on that. Another objective criteria is online. There are several websites like realtor.com or Zillow.com that when you look that up, they've got some price point that the property can be sold for, and you can use that. Or you can invest in a third-party appraiser, and that appraiser is going to go into the property, take a deeper dive and look at the details, and then come up with that magic number of the appraisal of the home, and then you can base your offer on that. And so all these 3 are different standards of objective criteria, and that's something that's really going to be of benefit to you as a technique for your negotiations. In conclusion, how you negotiate makes a big difference. It determines if you get what you want or not. And speaking of getting what you want, I've put together a goal creation workbook that's really going to help you crystallize and identify what it is you want in setting goals. Click on the link below to get started in creating and achieving your goals. And if you like this video, please click on the like button so that other people have access to this video and in improving their negotiation skills. And subscribe to this channel for more videos on leadership, personal development, and so much more.